The cardboard sign shook in Ethan's hands. By my daddy's Harley. Mom can't pay for his funeral. He stood on the cracked edge of a gas station lot just outside town. Too young to look that steady and too tired to look like a kid at all. The sign was cut from the side of a moving box. The black marker had bled through where his hand pressed too hard over the word funeral. Beside him, the Harley rested on its kickstand like something sacred that had been dragged into the wrong place. Black paint dulled by road dust, chrome still catching hard stripes of afternoon sun. Claire sat in their old Buick with both hands locked around the steering wheel, staring straight ahead, as if looking at the bike too long might break her. Cars slowed. People stared. A few took pictures through windshields. Nobody stopped. Ethan kept his chin up anyway. His father had taught him that much. If you were going to lose something, you lost it standing. Then the sound rolled in. Not one engine. Many. A pack of motorcycles swung off the county road and into the lot with the kind of force that made every loose soda cup and receipt skitter across the concrete. Black leather. Road grime. Heavy boots. The station clerk came to the window and froze. Two men at the pumps backed away from the Harley like it might explode. Ethan didn't move. Claire did. She came out of the Buick so fast the door slammed against the frame. "Ethan," she snapped, voice low and sharp, "put the sign down." But it was too late. The riders had already seen him. The formation slowed without a word. One by one, the bikes coasted past the pumps, engines rumbling deep enough to vibrate in Ethan's ribs. Their cuts carried the patch everyone in 3 counties recognized. Hell's Angels. The lead rider killed his engine first. He was a big man in his 50s, broad-shouldered, gray in his beard, with the kind of stillness that drew more attention than shouting ever could. He took off his gloves, looked at Ethan, then at the Harley, then at the tank. And something in his face changed. Not anger, not curiosity, recognition. He walked closer, eyes fixed on the script painted along the side of the tank in worn silver lettering. Most people would have missed it under the dust. He didn't. Ethan saw the man read the name. His father's name. The rider stopped dead. Behind him, the other bikers dismounted almost at once, their boots hitting concrete in an uneven line. Whatever they had been a second ago, loud, imposing, dangerous-looking, they were now alert in a different way. Focused, watching their leader. Claire stepped between Ethan and the men before any of them could come closer. "The bike is for sale," she said, forcing the words out. "That's all." The leader barely looked at her. His eyes stayed on the tank. "Where did you get this bike?" "It was my dad's," Ethan said. Claire shot him a warning look, but he didn't back down. This was his sign. His father's motorcycle. His family standing in public because there was no money left for privacy. The man finally looked at him. "Your dad's name was Daniel Mercer?" Ethan's mouth went dry. "Yeah." A murmur moved through the riders behind him, low and immediate, like a spark catching through dry grass. The murmur didn't die out. It spread through the line of bikes, through denim and leather and weathered faces, until the whole front of the grocery store lot felt charged. The man with the gray beard kept staring at the name painted on the tank as if it had reached across 20 years and grabbed him by the throat. Then his eyes lifted to Claire, to the paper sign trembling in her hands, and finally back to Ethan. "Take that sign down," he said. Claire stiffened. For one awful second, it sounded like humiliation on top of everything else. Her fingers tightened around the poster board. "We're not causing trouble." "I didn't say you were." His voice was rough, but not cruel. "I said take it down because your husband shouldn't be sold off in a parking lot like scrap." That changed the air. Ethan moved before his mother did. He stepped forward, reached for the tape, and peeled one corner loose from the folding table. It was a small act, but it shifted the balance of the moment. He was no longer just standing beside his mother while strangers judged them. He was choosing to trust a man everyone else in the lot seemed to fear. Claire caught his wrist. "Ethan, we came here because we ran out of choices," he said quietly, looking at her, not the bikers. "If Dad knew these guys, maybe this isn't the worst one." The gray-bearded rider gave the faintest nod, like the boy had passed a test nobody had explained. "My name's Ronan," he said. "Your dad rode with us before he got clean and walked away. Didn't wear our patch, but he bled beside men who did. Saved one of ours in Tulsa. Took a chain to the face for it. He touched the pale scar near his own jaw. That man was me. Claire's face lost color. For years she had lived with the version of Daniel Mercer that came after. The sober mechanic. The husband who promised her he was done with everything reckless, everything dark. Whatever existed before that had been packed away, buried, denied. He told me he used to run with bad people, she said. He never said this. Some men don't tell the woman they love every fire they walked through, Ronan replied. A pickup rolled past the entrance, slow enough to watch. The driver leaned out, grinning. So what's the price on Dead Man Chrome? Heat flooded Ethan's neck. The first crowd had been pitying. This was worse. This was public stripping of what little dignity they had left. Before Claire could react, Ronan turned his head. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Keep driving. The driver laughed once, saw the line of riders watching him, then hit the gas and disappeared out onto the road. But the damage had landed. Claire lowered herself into the metal chair behind the table like her knees might not hold. Public shame had become something sharper now, something Ethan could feel digging into her. Not just poverty, not just grief. Exposure. Ronan looked at the Harley again. Who's handling the funeral? Claire swallowed. A funeral home in town. We still owe for the viewing, the burial, the casket, everything. They gave us until tomorrow at noon before they cancel half of it. Tomorrow, Ronan repeated. That's why we're here, Ethan said. The word tomorrow seemed to hang over the gas station lot like bad weather. A truck rolled past on the highway beyond the pumps, dragging a gust of hot wind and road dust with it. The cardboard sign trembled again in Ethan's hands. Claire stood close enough to touch his shoulder, but she didn't. Her fingers stayed locked around the strap of her purse, as if letting go of that one thing might make everything else come apart too. For a few seconds, nobody from the line of bikes answered. Then one of the older riders stepped forward from behind Ronan. He was broad through the chest, gray at the temples, his cut sun-faded and creased from years on the road. A long scar pulled one side of his mouth tight when he looked at the Harley. He didn't ask Ethan another question. He didn't even look at Claire. His eyes went straight to the gas tank. The black paint had gone dull with age. Years of use had left thin scratches around the cap, and a vein of rust showed near the seam. Most people only saw an old motorcycle that might bring in a few desperate dollars. The rider saw something else. Hold up, he said, sharp enough to stop the murmuring cold. Ronan turned. What is it? The older man took 2 more steps, bent slightly, and rubbed his thumb across the side of the tank. Dust came away on his skin. Beneath it, almost ghosted into the paint, was a faded hand-lettered name in old gold striping. D. Mercer. Everything changed. Not loudly, not all at once. But the entire mood of the lot shifted so fast Ethan felt it before he understood it. A moment earlier, the bikers had looked like men deciding whether to help a grieving family. Now they looked like men who had just found a grave cracked open. Ronan's face hardened. No, the scar-mouthed rider straightened. You see it. Another biker moved in from the left, a woman with a dark braid down her back and mirrored sunglasses pushed up into her hair. She stared at the tank, then at Ethan, then back at the bike. That can't be random. Claire frowned. What is it? Nobody answered her. Ethan's grip tightened on the sign. What does that mean? The woman took off her sunglasses. Her expression had lost every trace of casual interest. That was painted by hand, she said. Long time ago. Club style. Not factory. Ronan stepped closer to the Harley, slow now, like the machine might bite. He looked at the old lettering for a long second, then crouched and checked the front fork, the bars, the frame, his eyes moving with the recognition of someone reading a language Ethan had never been taught. Where did your father get this bike? Ronan asked. It was his, Ethan said. As long as I can remember. That's not what I asked. The correction landed harder than a shout. Ethan swallowed. I don't know. He always had it. He kept it in the garage. He worked on it himself. The scar-mouthed rider let out a humorless breath. Yeah, Daniel would. Claire turned toward Ethan, confused now instead of ashamed. You never told me he knew these people. I didn't know he did, Ethan said. That, at least, was the truth. Ronan rose to his full height. Did he ever say the name Elias Voss? Ronan did not answer right away. He stepped closer to the line of bikes, his gaze fixed on Ethan like he was measuring a wound that had finally reopened. The scar at the corner of his mouth tightened. Around him, the other riders went still, the lot at the gas station falling into a silence so complete Ethan could hear the distant hum of traffic on the highway. Elias Voss, Ronan said at last, low and flat. So Daniel never told you the whole story. Ethan's throat tightened. Claire shifted beside him, one hand brushing the strap of her purse as if she needed something solid to hold on to. The old dread in Ethan's chest changed shape, becoming sharper. He had expected anger, maybe even trouble. What he found instead was the kind of respect that felt more dangerous, because he did not understand it. Ronan looked past Ethan, toward the white envelope tucked under Claire's arm. That debt, he said, isn't just funeral paper. It's a pressure point. People start collecting when they think a family is weak. Claire's face drained of color. Collecting what? Everything they can take, Ronan said. One of the younger riders, a broad-shouldered man with a gray beard, muttered, Voss still runs his mouth like he owns half the county. Ethan frowned. You know him? Ronan's eyes stayed on Ethan's. Your father knew him. Long before he bought that Harley. The sentence landed like a match thrown into gasoline. Ethan's first instinct was to deny it, to say it made no sense. But the way Ronan said your father made the denial impossible. This was not a guess. It was history. Ronan reached into his vest and pulled out a folded photograph, the edges soft with age. He held it out, but did not let go until Ethan took it. In the picture, Daniel stood beside a row of bikers Ethan had never seen before, younger than, leaner, with the same blunt set to his jaw. Behind them, on the tank of a black Harley, a name had been painted in white letters. Daniel's name. Ethan stared. The garage, the oil-stained rags, the late nights, the way his father always shut the door when that bike was running. Suddenly none of it looked like simple hobby work. It looked like a promise. Ronan spoke again, quieter now. Daniel helped one of ours get out from under Voss. That name on the tank meant something. It bought him respect. Claire looked from the photo to Ethan, her confusion giving way to a new kind of fear. What does that have to do with us? Before Ronan could answer, a hard voice cut through the lot from the roadside. Well, it said, amused and cold. That depends on whether you want this family matter settled quietly. Every head turned. A black SUV had pulled up without anyone noticing, its windows dark as wet stone. A tall man in a tailored jacket stepped out and adjusted his cuffs like he was arriving at a meeting, not a threat. He smiled once, thinly, at the gathered riders. Name's Voss, he said, and I believe you have something of mine. Ethan's pulse kicked hard against his ribs. Ronan did not move, but the air around him changed. This, he said, tapping the photograph with one finger, just became a hell of a lot more expensive. Claire didn't step back. She stood in the doorway with both hands on the frame, rain lights sliding over her face, and looked past Ethan at the men filling the yard. Her expression didn't soften when she saw the money. It hardened. This is not help, she said. This is the kind of trouble that follows people home and does not leave. Ronan's jaw tightened, but he stayed still. The other bikers waited behind him in a loose line, silent as church pews. The house behind Claire seemed smaller than it had an hour ago, its porch bulb buzzing weakly in the damp air. Ethan held the folded bills in one hand and the funeral papers in the other. Claire, we don't have another way. There is always another way, she shot back. Just not one that ends with club men in my driveway. The words landed harder than he expected, not because of the insult, because of the fear underneath it. From inside, a floorboard creaked. Then another. Their son was awake. Claire's eyes flicked toward the hallway window, and for the first time her anger cracked into something raw. You have no idea what you are bringing into this house. Ronan took one careful step forward. Ma'am, we're not here to scare your family. That is exactly what men like you always say. The yard went quiet. Ethan looked between them, feeling the weight of everything split in two. The money could cover part of the funeral. The bike club could make sure nobody pushed them around again. But if Claire closed the door now, he would lose both the help and whatever fragile trust was left between them. He started to speak, But Claire lifted a hand. No, I know what this world costs. I know what it asks for later. That stopped him. Not because she was wrong. Because the hurt in her voice said she had paid that price before. Ronan's gaze dropped for a second, as if he understood more than he wanted to say. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out the photograph Ethan had shown him at the station. He held it out, not toward Ethan, but toward Claire. Then look at this, he said. She didn't take it. Ronan set the photo on the porch rail instead and stepped back. The old black and white image caught the porch light. A younger man beside a Harley, one hand resting on the tank. Claire's breath caught so sharply Ethan heard it. Her face drained of color. Ethan frowned. Claire. But she wasn't looking at him. She was staring at the tank. At the name painted there. A name she had never said out loud in Ethan's hearing. A name that seemed to pull the air out of the porch. No, she whispered. One of the riders shifted behind Ronan, uneasy now. Ronan's voice stayed low. You know it. Claire's fingers tightened on the doorframe until her knuckles went white. I know enough. Then she turned, opened the door wider, and called into the house. Take your brother and stay in the back room. Lock it. The command was instant, sharp, and terrifying. Ethan's chest tightened. Claire, what is going on? She didn't answer him. She looked at Ronan, then at Ethan, and all the anger that had been burning in her face was gone, replaced by a fear so deep it seemed to have roots. Ronan did not step inside right away. He stayed under the porch light, his face unreadable, while Claire's words vanished into the house and the sound of a lock turning clicked hard through the rain. Then he looked at the Harley. Not at Ethan. Not at Claire. At the bike. One of the men behind him noticed it too and muttered, Boss. Ronan lifted a hand, and the yard went still. He crossed to the motorcycle slowly, boots dragging water across the concrete. Ethan moved with him, every muscle tight, but Ronan didn't reach for the handlebar or the chrome. He reached for the tank, where the faded paint had been worn thin by years of sun and weather. His thumb brushed one spot. A name. Ethan saw it only when Ronan tilted his head toward the light. Letters, half hidden under the grime and age, had been scratched into the tank beneath the old black finish. Not a nickname. Not a club tag. A full name. Elias Voss. Claire made a small sound behind a closed door. Not a word. A breath that broke. Ronan went still. That name, he said quietly, was supposed to be gone. Ethan stared at him. You know my father? Ronan's jaw flexed once. I knew a man who rode with us 30 years ago. Tall. Quiet. Wouldn't drink much. Wouldn't lie when it mattered. His eyes stayed on the tank. We all thought he vanished. The rain ticked harder against the yard. Nobody moved. Ethan's voice came out rough. He died last week. Ronan finally looked at him. Something old and sharp lived in his expression now, not anger exactly, but recognition tangled with grief. Then your mother should know why this bike matters. The door opened an inch. Claire's face appeared in the crack, pale and strained. Not here. Ronan turned toward her. You hid this from him? I kept him alive, she shot back. That was the point. A rider near the fence shifted his weight. Another glanced at the house like he was ready for orders. Ronan raised 2 fingers without looking away from Claire, and the men stopped again. Inside, he said. Claire hesitated, then stepped back. The door opened wider. Warm light spilled over the porch, and Ethan followed Ronan into the house before the rest of the bikers could crowd the yard. The room smelled like coffee gone cold and wet denim. Claire went straight to the kitchen table, where a shallow metal box sat beside a stack of unpaid bills, and the funeral folder Ethan had not been able to open. She laid the box down between them. Your father left it with me, she said. He made me promise I'd never tell you unless the bike came back. Ethan frowned. Back from where? Claire looked at Ronan first, then at Ethan. From the people who took it. Ronan's eyes narrowed. There were men after that Harley? Not men, Claire said. One man. Elias's brother. The room seemed to tilt. Ethan blinked. My uncle. Claire's mouth tightened. You never knew him because your father cut him out of his life. He was the one who sold out the family route, the one who handed names to people who wanted them buried. She touched the box once, like it burned. The Harley wasn't just a bike. It was proof. Elias kept the evidence hidden in it for years. The sound outside changed before anyone spoke. It was no longer just rain on gravel and the low idle of engines in the dark. It was the steady, organized rhythm of motorcycles arriving one after another, as if the whole road had decided to gather at once. From the porch, Ronan watched the yard fill. Men stepped out of the rain with their vests darkened by water, faces hard, eyes moving from the garage to the house to the black box on the table. A few of them said nothing at all. That silence carried more weight than any question. Ethan felt it in his stomach first. Not fear exactly. Something worse. The kind of pressure that comes when a private grief is about to become public. Claire stood beside the open door with both hands clenched around the frame. Her jaw was tight, but her eyes had gone wet. She had been trying to keep the night contained inside four walls. Now that was gone. Ronan's gaze stayed on the box. "You should have called this in sooner," he said. Claire gave a sharp laugh that held no humor. "And let this turn into a rumor before funeral morning?" One of the bikers in the yard shifted his weight. Another looked toward the neighbor's windows across the street, where a pale light had just blinked on behind a curtain. Ethan followed that glance and felt heat rise up his neck. They were being watched, not just by the men in vests, by the whole block. A truck door slammed somewhere down the road, and then a voice called out, too loud in the rain. "What's going on over there?" Ethan turned toward the sound, then back to the yard. His chest tightened hard enough to hurt. If this kept spreading, the funeral would not just be delayed. It would become a spectacle. Ronan finally looked at him. "How many people know about the service?" "Enough," Ethan said. Then, because the truth was uglier, he added, "Too many now." Claire's face flickered with shame. The family called the chapel. Someone heard there was a problem with payment. That's not all they heard. One of the bikers muttered. Another engine cut off. Then another. Ethan saw the phones in a few hands, screens glowing in the rain. He understood at once. By morning, half the town would know his father's burial was hanging by a thread. The thought made his throat close. Ronan took one step forward, careful and deliberate. "Here's the part nobody likes," he said. "If you want this handled quietly, you stop hiding pieces from us." The words landed like a slap. Claire looked at Ethan, then at the box, then away. Whatever she had been holding back was costing her, too. But the difference was that she had already carried it alone long enough. Ethan felt the room tilt toward a choice he did not want. Call the chapel, admit the family was broke, ask for mercy, and let the humiliation become official. Or let the funeral fall apart in front of everyone who had already started whispering. His father's name sat between them like something fragile and dangerous. A biker near the railing spoke into his phone, then lowered it. "They're saying there's a funeral home director on the way." Claire's head snapped up. "Who called them?" No one answered. That was the worst part. Rain had not eased by the time the first bikers moved. One by one, they stepped out from under the awning and formed a loose line beside the Harley, their boots dark on the wet concrete, their jackets shining under the station lights. No one spoke at first. Even the engines went quiet, as if the whole lot understood that something sacred was about to happen. Ethan stayed near the doorway, watching Ronan lower his head and rest a hand on the tank. The name there seemed to pull every eye in the group at once. Not curiosity, recognition. "Every club has a man like him," Ronan said at last, his voice rough as gravel. "The one who rides through hell and still shows up for everybody else." Claire's breath caught. She looked from the bike to the men around it. And for the first time since the funeral home had called, the fear in her face loosened into something Ethan had not seen all night. Ronan turned and nodded toward the open road. Two bikers immediately peeled off into the rain. A minute later, headlights flared in the distance. Then another pair. Then another. More riders were coming, not in a crowd, but in a line, steady, silent, deliberate. "What is this?" Claire asked. Ronan looked at her. "Honor." The word landed hard. When the new riders arrived, they did not ask questions. They did not crowd the doorway or glare at the family's bankruptcy papers spread on the counter. They simply walked up, one after another, and each man touched the Harley in passing like it belonged to a fallen brother. One of them set a folded black flag on the seat. Another placed a small leather patch beside the tank. A third reached into his vest, and laid down an old service pin, scratched and worn. Ethan stared. "Why are you doing this?" "Because your father did more than own a bike," Ronan said. "He carried a debt no one else saw." Claire's hand went to her mouth. That was when the funeral home director finally appeared at the glass door, a thin man in a dark coat with rain dripping off his collar. He held a clipboard and wore the kind of face that expected tears, signatures, and surrender. "I need a decision," he said flatly. "We can hold the body until noon tomorrow. After that, the arrangements are void." The room went still. Ethan felt the floor tilt. Noon tomorrow meant money they did not have, answers they still didn't possess, and a shame that would reach every person who had ever known his father. Before Claire could speak, Ronan reached into his vest and took out an envelope thick enough to matter. He set it on the counter without ceremony. "That covers tonight," he said, "and tomorrow morning." The director blinked. "That is not enough for a full service." "Then it won't be a full service," Ronan said. A few of the bikers exchanged glances. Then, in the same instant, they began taking off their rings, their patches, their cash, even the keys from their pockets. Metal hit the counter. Leather followed. Bills, folded and damp, spread under the station lights. Ethan looked at them, stunned. "You don't have to do that." Ronan's mouth tightened. "Yeah, we do." The director swallowed, suddenly less certain of himself. "This is highly irregular." The director stared at the growing pile on the counter as if it might turn into something illegal if he watched it long enough. It did not. It became something worse for a man like him. It became public. The cash was not enough by itself. Neither were the rings, the knives, the spare chains, the watches, or the patch one older biker set down with a face that suggested the gesture cost him more than money ever could. But under the station lights, with Claire standing rigid beside Ethan and half the county watching from the pumps and doorways, the meaning of it changed. This was no longer a private family failure. It was a line being drawn in the open. The director cleared his throat. "Even if I accepted this, there are forms, transfer fees, transport." Claire moved before Ronan did. She stepped to the counter, opened her purse with shaking fingers, and took out the folded envelope she had been hiding since the hospital. For 1 second, she held it like it might burn her. Then she laid it on top of the leather and cash. "I was going to use this to keep the lights on another month," she said. Ethan turned to her. "Mom." "No." Her voice broke, then steadied. "Your father spent his last years believing he had nothing left worth leaving behind but debt and trouble. I am not letting that be the last word on him." The room went still. She pushed the envelope toward the director. "Count it with the rest." It was not just money. Ethan knew that from the look on her face. That envelope was grocery money, rent money, medicine money, winter money. It was the last thin barrier between surviving and falling through. And she gave it up in front of everyone. The director hesitated now for a different reason. He looked at the mountain of wet bills, worn silver, patched leather, and Claire's envelope. Then he looked at the men waiting in silence beside the Harley. Ronan said nothing. He did not need to. The director reached for his clipboard. "If the amount is covered," he said carefully, "then the service proceeds in the morning." Ethan let out a breath so hard it hurt. One of the older bikers started counting. Another joined him. Then Claire did. Even the gas station owner came from behind the register with a cigar box of small bills from the charity jar near the coffee machine. No one spoke much. Only numbers. Only need. When they were done, the director checked the total twice. His expression changed on the second count. "That's enough," he said. No one moved. Then he added, quieter, "Paid in full." Claire covered her mouth. Ethan bowed his head, his hand gripping the edge of the counter until his knuckles went white. For the first time since his father died, the pressure in his chest loosened enough to let grief in without panic strangling it. But Ronan was still looking at the Harley. He reached inside his vest and took out the photograph again, now protected in a clear plastic sleeve. Beside it, he placed a small brass key on the counter. "Old. Scratched. Real. Your dad didn't keep evidence in the bike because he was greedy," Ronan said to Ethan. "He kept it there because he was scared no one would believe what Elias Voss did if he disappeared first."